The arena was silent. Thousands of alien citizens sat in the stone seats, staring down at the center. Their queen stood there, tall and proud, but her body was tired. Her armor was cracked, her crown broken at the edge, and her hands shook as she held her sword. The queen was known as a strong ruler. For many years, she had protected her people from enemies who wanted to crush their empire. But wars had taken their toll. The enemy armies had grown larger and stronger, while her forces had shrunk with each passing battle. Now she faced the final challenge, a duel that would decide the fate of her throne and her people. Her enemy was a commander from a rival empire. He was taller, stronger, and armed with a blade that glowed with strange energy. Around him stood soldiers who cheered loudly, certain of their victory. The queen raised her sword, though her arm felt heavy. She would not show weakness. She would not let her people see her fear. Yet in the crowd, the citizens whispered. Many of them had already lost hope. They had watched the queen fight so many times, and now she looked weaker than ever. Some even closed their eyes, unable to watch what they believed would be her final moments. The enemy commander stepped forward. His voice was sharp, filled with pride. "Your reign ends today," he shouted. "Your people will kneel, and your name will be forgotten." The queen did not answer. She only raised her sword higher, even though her body wanted to rest. The duel began. Steel clashed against glowing energy. The queen moved with skill, blocking the commander's strikes, but every clash shook her arms. She had fought many battles, but her strength was not endless. The commander pressed forward, his strikes growing faster, his grin wider. The crowd gasped as the queen stumbled back. Dust rose from the ground where her boots scraped against the stone. Her sword cracked, a line splitting down the middle. The commander laughed. "You cannot win. You are finished." The queen's chest burned as she tried to catch her breath. Her eyes narrowed, but she did not give up. She swung her sword once more, landing a strike that cut across the commander's shoulder. The crowd cheered for a moment, hope flickering in their eyes. But the commander only grew angrier. He swung his glowing blade with such force that sparks filled the air. The queen blocked again, but her sword shattered into two pieces. The broken steel clattered on the ground. The arena grew silent once more. The queen stood weaponless, breathing hard. The enemy commander raised his glowing blade high. "Bow before me," he commanded. "Accept defeat, and I might let your people live." The queen's jaw tightened. Her pride would not let her kneel. She spread her arms, ready to fight with her bare hands if needed. But inside, her heart sank. She knew this might truly be the end. The crowd murmured, restless and afraid. Some buried their faces in their hands. Others turned away, unable to watch their queen fall. Children clung to their parents, whispering questions about what would happen to them if their ruler was gone. The queen's closest generals stood at the edges of the arena. They wanted to run to her side, but they knew the rules. The duel was sacred. No one could interfere. The commander stepped forward, blade still glowing, ready to strike. His soldiers roared in triumph, already celebrating a victory that had not yet come. And in that moment, among the crowd, one pair of human eyes watched carefully. He was not from this world. He was not a soldier or a noble. He was simply a traveler, a visitor who had come to see the alien city. He had no weapon, no armor, no reason to be part of this battle. Yet as he watched the queen stumble and the crowd lose hope, something inside him stirred. The human clenched his fists. No one else seemed willing to move. Everyone was frozen in fear, waiting for the queen to fall. But he could not sit still. Something told him that this moment mattered more than anything he had ever seen. The queen, standing in the center of the arena, raised her head one last time. Her crown slipped down, almost falling from her hair. She looked at her people, her silent, hopeless people, and for the first time in years, she wondered if she had truly failed them. The commander's blade gleamed as he prepared the final strike. The crowd held its breath. And then a voice cut through the silence. "Stop." The single word echoed across the arena. Heads turned. The crowd shifted. The queen herself blinked in surprise. A figure stepped out from the crowd. It was the human. His steps were firm, his eyes sharp. He had no weapon in his hands, but he did not seem afraid. He walked straight toward the center of the arena, as if the danger around him did not matter. The queen stared at him, confused. The enemy commander frowned. The citizens gasped, wondering why a fragile outsider would dare interrupt such a battle. The human stopped a few steps away from the queen. He looked up at her, then at the commander. For the first time since the duel began, the arena was filled not with silence, but with a new kind of tension, uncertain, strange, and full of possibility. The queen, still breathing hard, realized something had changed. And so began the moment that would alter the fate of her world. The arena was frozen in shock. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The queen, standing weak and weaponless, turned her head slowly toward the voice that had broken the silence. It was him, the human. A stranger, a traveler, someone who had no part in this war. Yet there he was, stepping onto the stone floor of the arena as if he belonged there. The enemy commander frowned. His glowing blade was still raised high. He had been moments away from victory, and now this small figure interrupted him. His soldiers shouted in anger. "Remove him," one soldier cried. "He has no right to be here," another shouted. But the human kept walking. His steps were steady, and his eyes did not waver. He stopped only when he was close enough to stand between the queen and the commander. The crowd stared in disbelief. They whispered among themselves. "A human? What can he do? He has no weapon. Is he mad?" The queen herself looked at him with sharp eyes. She had seen many warriors, many challengers, but never one like this. She wondered if this human truly understood the danger he faced. The commander laughed. His voice was loud, mocking. "A human," he said. "This is your savior? This weak little creature who dares to stand before me?" The human did not answer. He simply raised his chin and looked straight at the commander. There was no fear in his eyes. The commander lowered his glowing blade until its edge hovered near the human's chest. "Step aside, boy," the commander warned. "This is not your fight. Leave now, and I may spare you." But the human did not move. His voice was calm but firm. "No. This fight belongs to everyone who refuses to kneel to you." The words echoed across the arena. The crowd stirred. Some gasped, others murmured in surprise. It was strange, hearing such boldness from someone so small, someone who had no armor or power. The queen's heart beat faster. She studied the human's face. There was no pride there, no arrogance, only determination. For a moment, she almost forgot her own weakness. The commander's grin faded. His eyes narrowed. "You dare speak of defiance? You, who cannot even lift a sword." "I don't need a sword," the human replied. "I have something you cannot break, wool." The commander snarled, his pride stung by the simple words. His soldiers laughed again, but the laughter sounded uneasy this time. The queen, still breathing hard, finally spoke. Her voice was low but steady. "Why do you stand here, human? This is not your world. You owe us nothing." The human glanced at her, and his expression softened for a moment. "Because sometimes, it takes just one voice to remind people not to give up. And I cannot sit and watch you fall." The queen's eyes widened. His words struck her heart more deeply than any blade. The commander raised his weapon again, his patience gone. "Enough. I will cut you down first, then finish your queen." But the human lifted his hand, pointing not at the commander but at the crowd. "You all hear him," the human shouted. "He thinks you are already defeated. He thinks you are weak. But I see something else. I see people who only need to believe again." The crowd shifted uneasily. His words spread like fire through the silent arena. For the first time in many days, citizens lifted their heads. The Queen's soldiers clenched their fists, feeling something stir inside them. The Queen herself felt a strange warmth grow in her chest. She had led armies, commanded fleets, and stood against countless foes, but never had she seen one person, alone and unarmed, speak with such force. The commander growled. "Empty words will not save you." He swung his glowing blade. The human did not step back. He stood tall, staring directly at the strike. At the last moment, the Queen moved forward, blocking the attack with the broken piece of her sword. Sparks flew. The crowd gasped. The Queen's knees almost buckled under the force, but she did not fall. For a moment, she and the human stood side by side, defying the commander together. The human leaned close and whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "You are not alone." The Queen's breath caught in her throat. She, who had always stood as the unshakable pillar of her people, suddenly felt strength return not from within herself, but from this fragile human who refused to back down. The commander pushed forward again, but now the Queen's eyes burned with fire. She had no full sword, no great strength, but she raised her broken blade as if it were enough. And the crowd began to cheer. It started with a single voice, then two, then 100. The people who had once sat in silence now stood to their feet. They shouted for their queen, and strangely, they shouted for the human too. The commander looked around, anger flashing in his eyes. He had come to show the people their ruler's weakness, but instead, the people were rising. The tide of the moment was shifting. The Queen straightened her back. For the first time in many days, she allowed herself to feel hope. The human had given her something greater than a weapon. He had given her the belief that she was not fighting alone. The commander stepped back, his grip tightening on his blade. His confidence wavered. The Queen, though battered and tired, raised her broken weapon high. "This is not the end," she declared, her voice strong once more. And beside her, the human stood firm, ready to face whatever came next. The enemy commander's blade glowed with fury as he glared at the Queen and the human. What was supposed to be an easy victory had suddenly turned uncertain. The Queen, though weak and weaponless, no longer stood alone. And the human, though small and fragile, had shaken the silence of the entire arena. The commander stepped forward again, his voice sharp like a blade. "You both are fools. Courage cannot stop my weapon. Words cannot win a war." But the human did not step back. He turned, not to the commander, but to the crowd. His voice rang clear, carried by a strength that came not from his body, but from his heart. "He is wrong," the human said. "Strength is not only in swords or armies. True strength is here." He placed his hand on his chest in the will to stand, even when others tell you to kneel. The crowd murmured. Citizens who had felt hopeless now raised their heads. Soldiers who had lowered their banners now gripped them tighter. The Queen watched in silence. Her body ached, but her spirit, long buried under the weight of endless battles, felt something new, a spark. The commander laughed bitterly. "Pretty words from a weak creature. Do you think anyone will follow you? Do you think hope will stop me from striking you down?" The human met his gaze steadily. "Then strike me down," he said. "Show your people that you fear even the smallest voice." The arena grew still. The human had no weapon, no armor, yet he stood taller than ever. His words were not a challenge of power, but of spirit. The Queen's generals shifted uneasily. They could not join the fight, but their eyes burned with pride. Some of them clenched their fists, whispering to one another that perhaps, just perhaps, This human spoke the truth. The queen took a slow breath. Her broken blade still shook in her hand, but when she looked at the human, she felt strength return. He had no reason to stand with her, no duty, no bloodline, no reward, yet he did. The commander swung his glowing blade again, faster than before. The human did not move. He stood as if rooted to the ground, his eyes locked on the enemy. At the last moment, the queen stepped forward, raising the broken half of her sword. Sparks flew as steel met energy. The force almost pushed her down, but she held firm, teeth gritted. The human's voice rang out once more, louder than the clash of blades. "Do you see?" he shouted to the crowd. "She still fights, even when broken. And if she can stand, then so can all of you." The crowd erupted in cries. The hopeless silence that had covered the arena was gone. Citizens shouted the queen's name. Soldiers pounded their fists on their shields. Even the children lifted their voices. The commander's face darkened. He looked around at the crowd, realizing he was losing something far greater than a duel. He was losing their fear. The queen's chest rose and fell, sweat on her brow, but her eyes glowed with a fire not seen in years. She turned to the human. "You speak as if you have led armies before," she said quietly. The human shook his head. "No. But I have seen what happens when people stop believing in themselves. And I cannot let that happen here." The queen's lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile. Strange, she had fought beside countless warriors, yet none had lifted her spirit the way this human did. The commander roared in frustration and attacked again, his blade flashing like lightning. The queen blocked one strike, then another, but she stumbled, her strength nearly gone. The human quickly grabbed a fallen shield from the ground and held it up. The glowing blade struck the shield, sending a shock through his arms, but he did not drop it. The crowd gasped, then cheered louder than before. A human, fragile, untrained, unarmed, was standing against a warrior feared across empires. The queen stepped beside him, lifting her broken sword once more. Together, they faced the commander, side by side. The human raised his voice again, his words carrying across the arena. "You think this is about winning a duel? No. This is about showing that we are not afraid. Courage is greater than your blade. Hope is stronger than your empire." The crowd roared, their voices shaking the air. Even the commander's soldiers looked uneasy. Some lowered their weapons, glancing nervously at one another. The queen's heart swelled. She straightened her back, no longer the weary ruler waiting for defeat. Instead, she was once again the leader who had sworn to protect her people, no matter the cost. The commander's strikes grew wild with anger, but the queen met them with renewed strength. Her broken blade sparked against his glowing weapon, and though she staggered, she did not fall. The human stood firm beside her, shield raised, shouting words of courage to the crowd. With each shout, the people grew louder, their voices joining as one. The commander faltered. His eyes darted to the crowd, to the soldiers who no longer cheered for him, to the queen who stood taller than before, and to the human whose will had turned the tide. For the first time, the commander felt doubt. The queen saw it. She pressed forward, her broken blade slashing across his arm. He stumbled back, shocked. The arena shook with cheers. The queen lifted her head, breathing hard but proud. And the human, still holding the battered shield, turned to the people and shouted one last time, "This is only the beginning." The crowd roared back, their voices united like thunder. The queen looked at the human, her eyes filled with wonder. He had not struck a killing blow, nor commanded an army. Yet in this moment, he had done something far greater. He had awakened hope. And hope, she realized, was a weapon stronger than any blade. The arena was alive with noise. The once silent crowd now shouted and cheered, their voices echoing off the stone walls. Citizens waved banners, raised fists, and called out their queen's name. The small human standing beside her had done what weapons could not. He had awakened hope. The queen felt the energy around her. Her chest, heavy with exhaustion just moments ago, now felt lighter. She raised her broken sword high, letting the cheers wash over her. For the first time in days, she saw courage reflected in the eyes of her people. The commander's face darkened. He had come expecting to crush a weak ruler, yet the queen stood taller than ever, supported by a crowd that refused to surrender. His soldiers looked uncertain, some whispering to one another, others glancing at the cheering citizens in fear. The human glanced at the queen. "You see," he said. "Your people are not defeated. They only needed someone to remind them of their strength." The queen nodded slowly. "You have shown me something I had almost forgotten," she admitted. "Leadership is not only about fighting. It is about inspiring others, giving them courage when all seems lost." The human smiled faintly. "And sometimes, it takes someone from outside to see it clearly." The commander roared in anger and raised his blade, striking at the queen with full force. She blocked with her broken sword, sparks flying as steel met energy. The human lifted a shield he had found on the ground, deflecting a strike aimed at her side. Together, they moved as one, her strength guiding his protection, his courage fueling her resolve. Around them, the citizens began to act. The arena guards, once hesitant, now rallied behind the queen. Farmers, merchants, and artisans who had watched in silence now took up banners and sticks, shouting encouragement to those around them. Even children, hidden behind their parents, clapped and cheered, their voices small but filled with excitement. The commander's army hesitated. They had expected an easy victory, yet the people they thought were weak and fearful now surged with confidence. The human's words, simple and clear, had lit a fire in the hearts of every citizen watching. The queen moved forward, her broken blade cutting the air with determination. She was no longer a tired ruler on the brink of defeat, she was a leader reborn. Each strike she made was backed by the hope of her people, each movement a message that they would not surrender. The human stayed close, shouting encouragement and pointing out threats the queen could not see. Though he had no formal training in battle, his presence gave the queen an unexpected advantage. The enemy commander had grown used to fear and submission, not resistance and unity. "Look around you," the human shouted to the crowd. "Every hand you raise, every voice you call, is stronger than any sword. Stand together, and we cannot be broken." The citizens followed his words. They moved as one, raising shields, shouting chants, and rallying behind the queen. Even some soldiers who had begun to doubt their commander now hesitated, unsure if they could strike against a people united by courage. The queen's generals, inspired by the crowd, joined the fight in small ways, moving supplies, guiding citizens, and protecting the wounded. Even the arena's walls, once a symbol of fear, now echoed with determination. The commander swung his blade wildly, trying to crush the unity rising against him. But every attack was met with resistance, not just from the queen and the human, but from the people themselves. The arena had transformed from a place of fear into a storm of courage. The queen noticed something extraordinary. Her people, ordinary citizens with no training for war, were now moving with confidence. They helped each other, cheered each other, and even challenged enemy soldiers when they could. The human had not only saved her life in the moment, he had given the crowd a reason to fight alongside her. The commander's anger grew, but his confidence waned. He had thought his glowing sword would be enough to break the queen and her people. He had not counted on courage, hope, and unity. The queen's heart swelled. She raised her voice and shouted to the crowd, "Stand! Stand with me! Our strength is not in weapons alone, but in our hearts. Today, we fight not just for me, but for all of us." The arena erupted. The sound was deafening, a wave of hope crashing over the commander's forces. Some of his soldiers began to retreat, unsure if they could face a people so united. The human raised his arms, cheering alongside the citizens. "Do not give up. Together, we are unstoppable." The queen looked at him, realizing that this small human had changed everything. He had not wielded a sword, nor commanded armies, yet he had done what even the strongest warriors could not. He had reminded her people of their courage and belief. For the first time, the queen felt certain that victory was possible. Not because she had regained full strength, not because her army was perfect, but because the hearts of her people burned with courage, inspired by the human who had dared to step forward when all hope seemed lost. And in that moment, the tide of the war began to shift. The arena was alive with movement. The citizens who had once hidden in fear now ran to aid their queen. They lifted shields, guided the wounded, and cheered loudly for the fighters in the center. The human stood beside the queen, his face calm but full of focus. The queen held her broken sword firmly. She had faced countless enemies before, but nothing like this, fighting not only for herself but for the hope of an entire people. Beside her, the human moved with surprising skill. He had no formal training in battle, but he had sharp eyes and quick reflexes. His courage made him a force no one could ignore. The enemy commander roared and charged forward, glowing blade cutting through the air. He had grown frustrated with the stubbornness of the queen and the human. This fight had become more than just a duel, it had become a test of spirit, and he was losing. The queen stepped forward, swinging her broken sword. Sparks flew as it struck the commander's weapon. She stumbled slightly from the force, but the human was ready. He threw himself in front of her, deflecting a strike that could have injured her further. "You are not alone," he shouted. The words seemed to ignite something in the queen's heart. She pressed forward with renewed strength, striking at the commander again. The human stayed close, using his quick movements to shield her from the blows she could no longer fully block. Around them, the crowd cheered louder than ever. Citizens raised their voices, shouting encouragement, waving banners, and lifting each other up. Even the commander's soldiers hesitated, unsure if they could continue attacking a queen supported by such unity. The queen's generals moved strategically among the crowd. They guided people to safety, helped the wounded, and directed citizens who wanted to fight. Their presence made the arena feel less like a battlefield and more like a united front, where every person had a role to play. The commander swung his glowing blade with furious speed. The queen blocked one strike, then another, and then a third. Sparks flew, and her arms trembled from the effort. The human, quick and clever, grabbed a fallen banner pole and used it to block one of the blows. It was not a perfect defense, but it was enough to keep the queen safe. The commander's face darkened. He had thought strength alone would win the day. But he had not accounted for the courage of a single human or the loyalty and hope of an entire people. "You are nothing," he shouted. "You cannot stop me." The human looked directly at him, eyes shining. "Strength is not just in weapons," he replied. "It is in will, courage, and belief. And we have all three." The queen struck again, her broken sword grazing the commander's armor. Sparks flew, and the commander stumbled back. He had underestimated them, underestimated the bond between a queen and her people, and underestimated the human who had dared to stand beside her. The citizens pressed forward. Armed with simple tools, sticks, and shields, they surrounded the commander's soldiers. Their courage inspired the queen's army, who now fought with renewed energy. The commander's forces wavered, unsure how to fight against such unity. The human moved with quick thinking, guiding citizens out of harm's way and using small barriers to slow the enemy. His actions allowed the queen to focus on the commander, who was growing desperate. Every strike the queen made was now backed by the hope and courage of thousands. Together, the human shouted, pointing toward the citizens rallying behind them. "Together, we cannot be defeated." The queen raised her broken sword one last time, her voice loud and strong. "Stand with me. Fight for your home, for your people, for hope." The commander swung his blade in a final attack, but the queen and the human moved as one. She blocked with her sword while he guided the crowd to shield her side. The commander stumbled, losing balance. He had fought countless battles but never against an opponent backed by true unity. With a final push, the queen pressed forward, her broken sword striking the commander's chest plate. Sparks flew, and the commander fell back. The human stood close, ready to protect her if needed. The citizens erupted into cheers. Their queen had stood firm, and the human had shown them the meaning of courage. Even some enemy soldiers hesitated, realizing that the battle was no longer just about force, it was about the will of a united people. The queen breathed heavily, but her eyes burned with determination. She looked at the human beside her. "You fought bravely," she said. "Without you, I could not have held my ground." The human smiled faintly. "We fought together," he replied. "You inspired everyone here, including me." The commander, realizing he could not continue, retreated with the remainder of his forces. The arena fell into tense silence, broken only by the cheers of citizens celebrating their queen's strength and the courage of the human who had stood beside her. The queen turned to the crowd, her voice carrying over the arena. "Today, we have not only defended our home," she said. "We have shown that courage, unity, and belief can overcome even the strongest enemy. Stand together, and we will protect what we hold dear." The citizens roared, their voices echoing across the city. The queen had survived, the enemy had been pushed back, and hope had returned. And beside her, the human stood quietly, a simple figure who had changed the course of the battle and perhaps the future of the entire kingdom. The battlefield was still burning. Smoke rose in heavy clouds across the ruined plains, and broken ships lay scattered like fallen giants. The alien queen stood beside Tamash, her strength returning but her army still too weak to fight a long war. The enemy commander had pulled back for a short time, but everyone knew they would strike again with even greater force. The queen's people looked at Tamash with a mix of hope and confusion. They had seen what his quick thinking had done before, but now the enemy fleet still outnumbered them. Victory seemed like a dream slipping away. Tamash stood quietly, his eyes fixed on the enemy ships in the distance. He was not a soldier, not a trained commander, but he carried something the enemy did not understand: human imagination. The queen spoke softly, almost as if she feared breaking the silence. "We cannot win with our strength alone. My army is broken. My weapons are few. What do you see, human?" Tamash did not answer right away. His mind worked quickly, following patterns, searching for a weak point. Then he finally said, "We don't need to fight them with power. We can make them fight themselves." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Make them destroy themselves?" "Yes," Tamash said. "Their fleet depends on communication. Look at the way their ships move. Every strike is timed, every signal sent from a central command. If we break that chain, if we twist their signals, they will fire on their own." The queen was silent for a long moment, then a sharp smile touched her face. "It is dangerous. If you fail, they will crush us instantly." Tamash nodded. "It's a gamble. But gambles are all we have left." That night, Tamash worked with broken pieces of alien devices. He had no advanced tools, no perfect knowledge, but he had a human skill of making something out of nothing. With wires, scraps, and stolen transmitters, he built a crude machine to copy and bend the enemy's signals. The queen watched him work. She had commanded scientists, engineers, and generals for years, but none of them could do what this human did in a single night. He was not following rules or tradition, he was creating new paths where no one else saw them. At last, Tamash looked up, his face lit by the faint glow of the machine. "It's ready," he said. "We'll send false orders. Their own ships will believe the commands are real. And when they fire, they'll turn their guns on each other. When dawn came, the sky filled with the enemy fleet. Rows of shining ships stretched across the horizon, a wall of death ready to end the Queen's reign forever. The enemy commander's voice echoed across the battlefield, mocking them. "Alien Queen, your time is over. Surrender now, or we will burn what is left of your world." The Queen stood tall, her voice strong once more. "You may try, but this world does not bow." Behind her, Tamash activated the device. Strange pulses of energy spread into the air. The enemy ships twitched as their systems caught the false signals. For a moment, nothing happened. Soldiers on both sides held their breath. Then the first enemy ship fired. Its beam struck another ship beside it, tearing through its hull. The explosion shook the sky. Confused signals followed, and more ships opened fire, believing they were attacking the Queen's forces. But instead, they struck their own allies. The battlefield erupted into chaos. The Queen's soldiers shouted in shock and amazement as the mighty enemy fleet turned against itself. Flames lit the heavens, and thunder rolled from ship to ship as they destroyed one another. The enemy commander's voice broke through the comms, filled with anger. "Stop firing! Cease fire!" But his orders were drowned out by the storm of false signals Tamash had released. Tamash stood calmly, his hands steady on the machine. "Hold, just a little longer," he whispered to himself. The Queen watched the destruction with wide eyes. "You did it, human. You made them destroy their own strength." But Tamash shook his head. "Not yet. They'll soon realize what happened. When they do, they'll come for us with everything they have left. We need to strike now while they're broken." The Queen raised her sword high, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "My people, the moment has come. The enemy falls upon itself, now we rise." Her soldiers, weary but inspired, charged with renewed strength. They struck the confused enemy forces on the ground while the sky above burned with the fire of broken ships. Tamash stayed behind the lines, guiding the signals until the last possible moment. His body trembled from exhaustion, but his mind stayed sharp. Each second the device held, another enemy ship fell. At last, the machine sparked and burned out. The false signals stopped. The sky grew quiet again, except for the falling wreckage of destroyed ships. Tamash collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily. The gamble had worked. The enemy fleet was no longer an unstoppable wall. It was broken, scattered, and weak. The Queen stood over him, her eyes shining with pride. "Your gamble saved us all. No general of mine could have thought of this. Only you, a human, saw the path." Tamash managed a tired smile. "We're not finished yet. But now, you have a chance to win." The Queen raised her sword again, looking at the burning horizon. For the first time in many years, she believed in victory. And all because one human had dared to gamble with the impossible. The battlefield was still shaking from the fire in the sky. Pieces of burning ships rained down, crashing into the ground like falling stars. The enemy fleet was broken. Their numbers had fallen, their formations scattered. For the first time, the alien Queen's people looked at the horizon and saw hope instead of fear. But the fight was not over. The enemy commander still lived, and his remaining forces were gathering. He shouted commands across the field, trying to rally his soldiers. His voice was fierce, but it carried a note of desperation. The Queen stood at the front of her army, her tall figure glowing in the light of burning ships. Her people waited for her words. She raised her sword and spoke with strength in her voice. "My people, the enemy weakens. This is our moment. We fight not just to live, but to rise again." A cheer spread through the army. Even those who were wounded lifted their weapons. Their courage had returned, and it came from one place: the human who had turned the battle. Tamash stood behind them, his body tired, his hands still blackened from the machine that had burned out. His heart pounded, but when he looked at the Queen's people, he saw their eyes shining with new belief. He never thought he would lead aliens in battle, never thought his small actions could carry such weight. But now, all of them looked at him as if he were a spark that had lit a fire. The Queen looked back at him and gave a nod. It was a silent promise, we fight together now. The battle began again. The enemy commander, furious at the loss of his fleet, ordered a final charge. His soldiers came in waves, shouting with anger. But the Queen's people did not break. They met the enemy head-on, their courage stronger than their fear. Tamash stayed close to the Queen. Though he carried no sword, he guided her warriors, pointing out weak spots, warning of traps, and using his sharp eyes to notice what others missed. At one point, a group of enemy soldiers tried to surround the Queen. Tamash grabbed a fallen staff from the ground and swung it with all his strength, knocking one of them aside. The Queen cut down the others with her blade. She looked at him with surprise, then smiled. "You are no soldier, yet you fight beside me as if you were born for this," she said. Tamash shook his head, breathing hard. "No, I just know that if we stand together, we can't be broken." The battle raged for hours. Dust and smoke covered the land, but the Queen's army pushed forward step by step. The enemy grew weaker, their commander shouting louder, his anger turning into fear. Finally, the Queen and Tamash reached him. The enemy commander stood tall, his armor shining with dents and burns. His soldiers had fallen around him, yet he still raised his weapon. "You think a weak human can change fate?" the commander spat. "You think a broken queen can rise again?" The Queen lifted her sword, her voice clear and sharp. "I do not think it. I know it. For you see, fate has already changed." She and the commander clashed. Sparks flew as their blades struck again and again. The Queen's strength returned with each strike, while the commander's blows grew weaker. Tamash circled behind, looking for a chance. He saw the commander raise his weapon for a final, desperate strike at the Queen. Without thinking, Tamash rushed forward and shoved a piece of broken metal into the commander's side. The commander stumbled, and the Queen struck the final blow. His weapon fell, and his body crashed to the ground. The enemy army froze, their leader defeated. Silence spread over the battlefield. Then, slowly, the enemy soldiers lowered their weapons. One by one, they surrendered. The Queen's people raised their voices in victory, their cheers echoing across the land. The Queen stood tall, breathing heavily, her sword shining in the firelight. She turned to Tamash, who was still holding the broken piece of metal, his hands shaking. "It is done," she said. "We are free." Her people gathered around, chanting her name. But then the Queen raised her hand, and the crowd grew quiet. She pointed at Tamash. "This human," she declared, her voice carrying across the field, "is the reason we stand here today. When all seemed lost, he rose. When I was ready to fall, he gave me hope. He is no general, no warrior, yet he changed everything." The crowd turned to Tamash. At first, he felt small under their eyes. But then, as they bowed their heads in respect, he realized something powerful. He was not just a human in their eyes, he was the symbol of courage they would never forget. That night, a great fire was lit in the center of the camp. The Queen sat beside Tamash as her people celebrated their freedom. She looked at him with respect that few had ever seen in her eyes. "You risked your life for me, for my people." "Why?" she asked. Tamash thought for a moment before answering. His voice was simple, but strong. "Because no one should stand alone. Not even a queen." The Queen's gaze softened. "Then remember this, human. From this day, your people will never be forgotten. You are part of our story, and our story will be told for generations." As the stars shone above, Tamash looked at the sky filled with wreckage and light. He had not come to be a hero. He had only stepped forward when no one else would. Yet in doing so, he had changed the fate of a world. The queen rose, lifting her sword high. Her people cheered again, their voices rising into the night. And among them, a single human stood, forever remembered as the one who turned despair into hope, and defeat into victory. The war was over. But the legend of the human who changed everything had only just begun.